Start with the announcements. Good morning, everyone. A great good morning to you. A few announcements. Yesterday was Seva Saturday for this month. Only a few devotees came to serve, yet those who did come stayed long hours and accomplished a lot. Many thanks to them. Our Wednesday evening class. We have finished our study of Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. Next Wednesday at 7:30 p.m., we will continue to read and discuss Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace. Those of you who don't know this book, I invite you to join us. It will be very uplifting for you, I can tell you. Next Saturday at noon, there will be no class. That's June 18th, Saturday. I need to be away from the center that day. So Ted McGill left us some things in his will, and the request of the executor of his estate is that we come and pick this up in person and sign for it. So I'm going to McDonald, Tennessee to do that. As a reminder about the center's closure in August, there will be no classes and no Sunday talks in August. Evening Arati will continue as usual, but it will be done by others, and the Chandi hymns will be chanted in Sanskrit and recited in English. So those are the announcements. Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahai, tejasvina vaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, may the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be to us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Well, again, good morning, and welcome to those of you who troubled yourself to drive here this morning, and to those of you who have joined us online. Thank you for taking the time with us. June is a month for study of Bhakti Yoga, the devotional path. A Bhakti yogi, a bhakta, establishes a devotional relationship with God through study, prayer, ritual, and worship. This often begins with a feeling of reverence or awe, which may slowly grow into a conviction that everything, without exception, manifests God's power, glory, and grace. As a bhakta, you practice giving every action, thought, emotion, perception, and tendency a Godward turn. All your energies and attributes, both positive and negative, are offered to the divine presence. Your prayer is for self-surrender and ultimately union with your beloved. So that's a brief summary of Bhakti Yoga. And as I remind everyone, this is not what we're going to discuss this morning, is not personal instruction for you. This is just a perception from here of what might be the answer to the question, why is this dream of life so compelling? Take from it what you will, if anything at all, but please don't feel that there's anything dogmatic or any shoulds or musts about what you hear. It is for your enjoyment and for your possible use that we try to answer the question, why is this dream so compelling? I'm going to start with a quote. You were born to the infinite, and within your heart is all of love. So start giving it away. If you ask for anything in return, your ocean becomes a drop. From the highest God to this worm and beyond, to the atoms in the stars, everywhere the same God loves all. Friend, lay your mind, soul, and body at their feet. He is in front of you right now. And He is in front of you right now, and the different forms He's taken. If you turn away from them, where will you find Him? The first to love God in all beings, without thinking, worships God. This is Swami Vivekananda from his letter to a friend, written in Bengali and interpreted here by Peter Schneider, known in Hollywood as Hiranyagarbha. He was a dear friend. The first to love all beings without thinking worships God. A bhakta who knows the divine presence might respond, oh yes, amen, well said. But the Swami also insisted that our life in Maya is a kind of dream. How will the bhakta reconcile these two statements? Perhaps she will think of yet another Swamiji quote. Quote, the whole universe is one. There is only one self in the universe, only one existence. The whole universe is one. There is only one self in the universe, only one existence. End of quote. And therefore, even the dreamlike nature of her life must be part of that oneness. But why is this dream so compelling, so captivating? Logically, the only answer is because we want it to be. We like it. Logically, the only answer to the question, why is this dream so compelling, so compact, so captivating, is that as the divine being, if there's only one existence, if there's only one self, then that must be the self within each of us that is generating this. So the fact that it is compelling, captivating, we must like it that way. We must want it that way. So let's pause here and ask, is there any comment from your own wisdom or experience about this, or any concern or question that these statements give rise to in you? Anything at all? Yes, dear.
When I first read that letter to a friend, Swamiji, and got to that part, which is the end of it, that you just read, and got to the part about the first to love all without thinking worships God, that struck me as that's it. That for me, from my perspective anyway, and I would, if I wrote that or rewrote it, I would just also say, or say instead, the first two, love all beings without thinking, gets it.
Without thinking?
Gets it. Gets it. Yeah. And the words without thinking are very, very important. Without reasoning about it. We'll go into why that is so important. That's the next thing that comes up in this talk. Why is it so important? Anything else from anyone?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or somebody online. But
Yes.
Robert?
Yes. You just said it was that way because we want it that way. Does this imply that anything that we may want, we can have it exist and exist to that degree?
Ask and ye shall receive. The divine is the wish-fulfilling tree, we're told. Is it auspicious for us to want certain things? Perhaps not. But as Hafiz says so poignantly, every thought is an innocent step on the path. We cannot be otherwise than in innocence. We'll talk about what I mean by that. We have to be innocent. We are not capable of understanding all that the self of ourselves creates. Does that get it, Robert, or is there more?
Okay.
Very good.
We'll go with that for now.
Okay.
Father, brother, Gaurav
Yes.
here. Well, I come from Calcutta, and this is something from Mother Teresa, and she was a splendid person. And she said something like, I have found the paradox that if you love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love.
What a beautiful statement. That's the first time I've heard that. And yes, it expresses a very profound truth that in yoga, the true love, we go beyond the ordinary constraints of pain.
But again, like on another piece that I wanted to add to it, I relate to it being a father myself, having a child. Lord Buddha said, you got to love the world as if it's your own child.
Yes. As a matter of fact, in that letter to a friend.
Yes, Swami Vivekananda mentions that.
Yes, he does mention
it. Was so profound, still gives me chills when I mean.
Yes. It's quite a poem. It will be included with the full poem, it was translated by Hiranyagarbha Peter Schneider as a poem. And it will be, his translation, his interpretation will be included with the notes of this talk online. So anybody who wants to find it will be able to find the full letter to a friend. It's quite a remarkable statement.
Yeah. And I was actually fortunate to meet Mother Teresa. So.
Oh, well, Very fine.
Could you
Yes.
repeat that quote for us
Which quote is that, dear?
from Mother Teresa?
When you love till it hurts, you
I
will
can
find.
read that again if you want
Please,
to.
yes, please.
Me too. It says, I have found the paradox that if you love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so, now this, on the idea that the illusion that we're all in, the illusion or the dream or hallucination, Maya, whatever you want to call it, that we experience that because we want to experience it. I'm just speculating, but my hunch is that it's part of our evolution, that we evolved this mental model so we could survive. You know, just like we survived, we evolved our legs so we could run, and that the mental model that we're trapped in has something to do with evolution and survival.
Well, the bhaktas idea, Tom, is a different one.
Right.
They're not trapped. They're not trapped. They celebrate it, as we'll see as we go on in the talk. So the bhakta does not accept the idea of bondage.
Okay.
And sees, as we'll see as we go on, that this dream as seen, these limitations, which you call trap. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm simply saying
Right.
the bhaktas, we're talking about the bhaktas interpretation. The jnani definitely sees this as, so we'll talk about that when we talk about jnana. Each of the ways of dealing with this has its own system, its own workbook, its own metaphors. But the bhakta does not accept that they are trapped. And they say, we're this way because we like it.
So let me just finish.
Yes, please.
My thought. Okay, so for me, the challenge with sort of like integrating my worldview to understand reality is that I do think, I'm almost not totally certain, but I think that we evolved through random mutation and natural selection, from single cell bacteria to multi-cell things, to fish, to amphibians, to mammals, to apes, to people. And that explains a lot of who we are and what we are. And so to integrate that with the actual experiences of meditation and spiritual life, which are really important, that's sort of my challenge, because a lot of the Vedanta ideas can seem in conflict with my scientific worldview of us as a product of evolution. So I don't know that I will ever get all of this straight or understand it, but that's sort of like my challenge, is to integrate all of these different ideas.
So Vedanta answers, and Bhakti especially answers, there is no conflict between this idea of scientific evolution and Vedanta's idea of evolution. The only question is, what evolved? What is it that evolved? What is it that created the universe to start with? Why did this come into being? Because we, as the divine being, wanted it to be. That's the Bhakta's answer. And so when the cosmic mind, as related to us in the Chandogya Upanishad, said, I am one, I shall body myself forth as many, the dream began. And it did it according to what Swami Sarvapriyananda said to us one day, because it can. And it must do it because it likes it. Because if we don't like something, we stop it. Isn't that so? Being, creating, doing, sharing, the joys of these is why we're here. When you're truly tired of this, just sign off and head for home. This is, so to speak, the Jnani's answer. Yes, Uma.
This is something right and wrong, what you said. As I'm thinking of why we love to dream in spite of knowing that the dream is a dream, it's not real, it's going to end. And yet, we love to keep dreaming until something shocking or bizarre happens in the dream, and we just jolt, and wake up from that dream. So I think it's very psychologically sound that anyone who loves to dream play the game. Like God created this world from one to become many, and
Yes.
see how it plays out.
Yes.
And similarly, we all know mortal creatures. We like all this, as long as it's going smoothly and well. But the moment some jarring event happens and it shakes you
Mhm.
and awakens you, that okay, enough is enough, and now wake up, now no more.
Uh-huh.
So these are just the thoughts.
Very nice. Very nice. Yes, dear.
Just, yes, I'm going off of what Uma was just saying. It made me think of, dreaming, like when we're asleep, having a dream, like you're talking about, but also, a dream is an unreality or a fantasy, which is also why we like to watch a movie
Yeah.
or read a book,
Yeah.
because we go off into this other unreal world and we enjoy it. But when we get to the end, we may not even need the jolt to wake up like in a dream. We just come to the end of that fantasy world and we close the book and we're back. And I'm just kind of seeing
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this dream of Maya, this unreality. We're here until we're done, when we're done with the story. And not up here, but,
Yeah.
on a
Well,
different level.
This is what Vivekananda says. When we love all beings without thinking, when simply the love of being and beings motivates us, then he says we are truly worshiping God. This is an interesting formulation. So is there anything else? Yes, Dr. Mudge.
The critical word here is without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment you think, then everything goes away. Even the dream, even a nightmare. The moment you think it was a nightmare, it doesn't bother you anymore. So that thinking is very important. But the question is, in the absence of thinking, we get not only attached, we get adherent to whatever experience is temporarily filling our life. Even a grief, you say, grief, we do not love grief, but we hold on to it. We keep on talking about our grief until we are tired of it and the grief goes away. And that's how the people that it was so difficult to part with, in about a year's time, you say, why was I crying so much when that person passed away? So the question is again of thinking. And that thinking is not a brain thinking. It's an instinctive thinking generated by true knowledge. And this is what most of our saints have entered a phase of true knowledge.
Yes.
And therefore, Buddha, when the woman came that my son died, could you make him alive? He could understand that this grief also is a temporary phase, comes and goes away. But we have
Yes.
to stick to our life. That is the very property of life. Without that, not evolution or involution, but without that, the life would have been impossible. Comically, we always give the example of a patient who is about to die, and the doctor says that sorry, there is no cure for you. You are going to die. Do you have any wish? He says, yes. Can I have another doctor?
Very nicely said. I'd like a second opinion
Because of me.
regarding this dream,
Yes.
however,
It's all right.
regarding this idea of this as a dream, a compelling dream.
Yeah.
In any case, as the gamblers say, it is the only game in town. Your dream, which is of course unique, may have an infinite number of levels, yet it is dream, dream, dream all the way down. From the most gross and sensuous, outward directed way of living to the silence, serenity, clarity, and peace of the deepest meditation, it's still an experience within Mahamaya, the great cosmic dream of time, space, and causation. As long as there is any experience, there is an experiencer, and there is therefore time, space, and causation. Or, as Swami Yogeshananda put it, consciousness is primary and is not plural. Consciousness is primary and is not plural. Therefore, consciousness, divine presence, the self, existence, God, the life you live, all one and all the same. Swami Yogeshananda said, consciousness is primary and is not plural. So all these names we have, consciousness, divine presence, the self, existence, God, the life we live, they're all various names and ways of being with that one and the same truth, which leads directly to the logic of Swami Prabhavananda's instruction, give everything a Godward turn. What does it mean to give everything a Godward turn? To see everything within the context of Yogeshananda's teaching. This non-plural universe appears to you and me as limitation, increasing complexity, and specialization. Yet, because it is infinite, it is far beyond our limited ability to make sense of it. Those of you who follow physics and quantum mechanics, as we know, much has been learned over the millennia, and particularly a lot has been discovered in the last 200 or 300 years. And yet, the astrophysicists and the quantum mechanics physicists tell us that, oh my God, we have only been studying 5% of what exists. The other 95%, we don't know at all what it is. We see its effects, and we have these clumsy categories. They agree that they are clumsy categories. Dark energy, dark matter. 95% of universe, of this cosmic manifestation, is contained within those two clumsy categories. So when St. Catherine of Siena said, "We know nothing until we know everything," she wasn't just whistling. There is so much to know, but there is a way of being with it that doesn't require this imperative of understanding it. Therefore, a bhakta of long practice, a bhakta, someone who has been practicing the bhakti path for a long time, embraces all forms of limitation. That bhakta embraces all forms of limitation as necessary to experience God's glory and grace, and so loves all being without thinking. Not just all beings, but all being without thinking. As a result, she probably tends to live simply, to find joy in feeding the birds and shelving books as a volunteer at the local library. So that was all pretty provocative. Is there anything that arises from having said all that? This is definitely an accurate interpretation of the bhakta way, of the bhakti's path. They embrace limitation. They don't see this as a bad dream. They say, oh, this dream, it's necessary to experience God's glory, love, and grace. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, an auspicious thing.
So Prophet, Bhakta accepts everything.
Everything.
What it called, what that said or black or whatever.
Yes,
It's not the within it.
all being. Yes, the bhakta embraces all being. The jnani has a different idea. The yogi has a different idea. The karma yoga has a different idea. This is all wonderful and fine. We're talking today about the bhakta's way, about what the bhakta thinks. That is to say, without going on and on about it, they simply think. It's actually done not so much with thinking as it is just in heartfelt response to being. They embrace the limitations and don't see them as a trap, don't see them as bondage. And this is what Sri Ramakrishna refers to as vijnana, special knowledge beyond jnana, the ability to see everything and all being, and for that matter, non-being, the void, as manifestations of God's glory and grace. Anything at all from those who are with us online?
Yes, Shankara, Amadas here.
Yes, Amadas.
The words of Sir Francis Bacon by way of Shakespeare come to mind. All the world is a stage.
All the world is a stage.
And each one one of us merely an actor on the stage.
Amadas, can you change your position
And
a
that
little bit? We're losing you.
that sounds like what the yes makes it easier to conceptualize that what's happening. Sorry, I'm in a low. Let me turn. I'm in a.
Well, could you just start over?
Can you hear me any
please?
better now?
Much better. And please start over with your quote from Shakespeare. All the world's a stage.
All the world is a stage, and each one of us is merely an actor. And that perception softens what I see as experience as the hardness of life. If it's just
Yes.
something that I need to go through for the awakening, that's different than when I take it personal. Like my divorce, for instance, just passed my 3-year anniversary of that. And that was a devastating experience, but it's because I didn't look at it as a play, a scripted play like that was supposed to happen. Like I hear the Bhakti perspective is. It would have been a more empowering perspective for me to have participated in.
Okay.
And so I see the value in seeing that Maya is necessary and that I need to go through whatever I need to go through to wake up, because the waking up is the goal. It's not the suffering. The suffering's just a step along the way.
Very good. And whether it's necessary or not, Maya, whether it's necessary or not, which is just a way of thinking about it, it's the only game in town. Find me another one. Find me another one. There simply isn't another one. This is the one we've got. And so we're talking about the bhaktas way of looking at it.
And brother, if I may chime in on exactly that, I've been reading the book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Oh, yes. Good for you.
Oh my gosh, it is beautiful. I mean, he's awakened, then he gets into Maya, and then he starts realizing everything. He's awakened, and then he goes through the whole cycle, and then he gets back into Maya, and then he's coming out of it. It is astounding.
Yes. Yes. That book by Hesse indicates the level of Hesse's embrace of the whole realm of being.
So
how
yes,
deeply he understood it.
And it is fantastic, and I have gone through divorce too. I totally echo.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, dear.
Yes, so about 3 years ago again, or 4, yeah, something like that. So I understand that, and the more I read that, it kind of helps me reconcile a little bit that it's bigger than any of the events that have gone through our lives.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Brother Shankara, this is Haima from Denver.
Yes, Haima.
Namaste, everyone. I just want to add to some of the other devotees' comments. I was watching Ram Dass's Fierce Grace documentary.
Oh, yes.
It was excellent, excellent, excellent. And he said, even though he had stroke and he was in that nursing home or wherever he was, he said even stroke was grace. Sometimes the adversities turn out to be grace later on. In the beginning, it may be painful, but over time, when you look back, oh my God, I'm glad that happened. That's why I'm here today, more illumined, moving forward, not hating anyone, and forgiving. Like forgiveness is like giving up the hope that the past could have been any different.
Yes.
And that is the way it was supposed to be. And now we move on without hating anyone. So, and when he said stroke was grace, I could relate to that very easily. It was a wonderful documentary. If anybody wants to watch it, it was free on Netflix.
The title, Fierce Grace.
Yes.
You know, Ram Dass was a very successful teacher. He was going along, you know, he had great crowds and people, adulation, all of the things that come with being a spiritual teacher of renown. And suddenly he's struck with this massive brain hemorrhage. And instead of thinking, oh, I'm being released into the divine, he's thinking, oh my God, what's happening to me? Oh, my God, this is terrible. Oh, I'm losing everything. I know. He said, I acted like a child, like a baby. And then he came to say, this is why he called what happened to him grace, but fierce grace. It was not pleasant, as Haima pointed out in the beginning. But he went on to integrate all of that into his life. And so we've heard two recommendations three. Shakespeare, I think that the quote that Amadas gave us was from Hamlet, if I'm not mistaken, might be from King Lear. But in any event, any Shakespeare that you want to read will be worth your time. And then Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and Fierce Grace, this documentary about Ram Dass's experience of thinking of himself so highly and finding out the reality of what lay underneath. And so he was able to slowly release all of that and be within the grace. Anything else from anyone? Yes, Dr. Mudge.
You know, the truth in our Vedantic discussion comes from many corners.
Yes.
And it turns into a cumulative truth.
Yes.
For example, he quoted Shakespeare's very well-known quotation about the world is a stage, etc., etc. But Swami Vivekananda added to that one. The difference, he says, that a beggar who is acting like a beggar does not suffer. He shows that he's suffering, but he doesn't suffer himself.
You mean the actor who's playing
actor,
a beggar? Yes.
Actor. But that means that the moment he is given a piece of bread, he might be acting like a starving man. The act is over. And when you give bread to him, he would not say, now I cannot take bread because I'm a starving man. He accepts the bread, starts eating, and moves on.
Yes.
So whatever you say, for example, about the physicist, they said, we do not know. Newton said the same thing too. That at the end of my career, I know that I'm only a child collecting shells from the seashore. The real knowledge is far beyond.
Yes.
But you made a very important statement that those physicists said, oh my God, we only know 5%. Then why did you have to say, oh my God? Because God is omniscient.
Yes.
That's what you know.
I don't know if they actually said that.
No, but it's a good thing. If they did not say that, we can say that.
Yes, yes.
Because we have to accept that omniscient, because this is very necessary, because basically whether it is Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, our approach is quantitative.
Yes.
It should be qualitative.
And this leads directly to the next point, Dr. Mudge.
Yes.
As we know about this liking it the way it is, we know what happened to Arjuna when Krishna allowed him to see the unlimited manifestation. What happened? Arjuna soon begged Krishna to resume his familiar, limited form. Yes, Lori.
Well, so Swamiji, when Ramakrishna
First touched him, yes, yes. What are you doing to me? I have my family at home. So this is.
Don't wake me up from the dream yet.
No, So a bhakta's way of thinking goes beyond thinking about it this way or that. Because the bhakta simply doesn't want to do that. The bhakta says, I can think about it any number of ways. And it all adds up to the same thing. I'm right back where I was. So my heart says, embrace it, see it for what it is. This one universe of Mahamaya, but it is full of glory and grace and sorrow and darkness. It is all of this. But no matter how I think about it, it isn't going to change it one iota. So please let me know it for what it is. And so rather than thinking about it, the bhakta, it becomes how she sees and behaves. Swami Vivekananda said, I am all jnana on the outside, but all bhakta on the inside. That's what he said. I am all jnana on the outside, but all bhakta on the inside. And so this, again, to quote, is what he wrote in that letter titled To a Friend. You were born to the infinite, and within your heart is all of love. So start giving it away. If you ask for anything in return, your ocean becomes a drop. From the highest God to this worm and beyond, to the atoms in the stars, everywhere the same God loves all. Friend, lay your mind, soul, and body at their feet. He is in front of you right now, and the different forms he's taken. If you turn away from them, where will you find him? The first to love all beings without thinking worships God. So this is Swami Vivekananda speaking as a bhakta, not as a jnani. Yes, dear.
I've been thinking about this just the past few days, and the without thinking. I mean, I get what he's saying, I think. But I feel like a bhakta is a person who has decided or said, you know, the heart, because we think of bhakti as the heart-centered path, and it is, but it's like the heart is as high as my mind can go. So, I mean, human beings are always going to think. Bhaktas think too. Maybe they think even more than other people. Who knows? But it's bringing those thoughts down and mushing them all in with your heart and realizing that the heart is the center of the universe.
Yes, that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Within you, within your heart, is all of love. And Vivekananda also said, if it comes to an argument between the head and the heart, yield to the heart. Yield to the heart.
But this is because we think brain is complicated and heart is simple, which is not true at all. Heart is the most complicated organ that you can do. It keeps on pumping day and night. Even one split second of rest of the heart is called cardiac arrest.
Yes.
So heart is not only central, it's very complicated, And therefore, to say bhakti is simple is not true.
I'm not talking about.
No, I'm not talking about you
about
either.
the organ in the body.
Yeah, but I'm translating into, even when you keep it as an organ of the body, if the heart doesn't pump, the brain doesn't work.
No, it's yes, you're absolutely right, Dr. Munch. It's not simple. If you think it's simple to embrace all being, to embrace all limitation, then you haven't tried. It is not simple. Your mind will trip you up. Your body will trip you up. This is why Christ said, "Oh, please be passersby. Don't get stuck. Don't get stuck." Because Christ preached primarily, not exclusively, but primarily the devotional path. So the bhakta's way, this embrace of all limitation as necessary to experience, to be in the presence of God's glory. Now, we can contrast what the jnani says. The jnani says, I will annihilate the mind. This is the word that they use. All that I'm experiencing is nothing more than a vibration of consciousness. It appears to me as this Sankhya formulation of the mind and the 5 organs of perception and the 5 organs of action. I reject it all. I will annihilate the mind and its ability to cling to these things. Sri Ramakrishna says, well and good. But in this time and in this place, very, very difficult indeed. And the reason being, he said, is that we are so dependent on food. Now, of course, by food, he meant physical nourishment, but it's a metaphor for stimulation. And if we want to know the truth of this, just look around this noisy world of ours. We absolutely specialize in creating stimulation. And then we specialize in ways to self-medicate when we get ourselves overstimulated. So this is a discussion today of the bhaktas path and why this dream arises for us at all, and when it does, why it is so compelling. Any final thoughts from anyone?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
I remember, or it brings to mind what you always say about the expert musician or expert dancer. In the beginning, when we are practicing, it's a chore and it's not pleasant either for the person learning or teaching or somebody listening. But the moment we get better and better, then we get into the flow and it becomes blissful, so it comes automatically. Likewise, in the beginning, we can, it's easier to become a bhakta of the things and the people to whom we are naturally attracted.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we keep practicing, then slowly that circle can expand and then eventually lead to where we can, I guess, connect with everything as God without thinking.
which is why Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood could say to everyone without exception, I like you just the way you are. Now just imagine being able to say that with complete conviction and sincerity to everyone you encounter. I like you just the way you are. This is a bhakta. This is one who's embraced all being and all the limitations that create the various forms of being. He was also a very good pianist, by the way. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, please.
I'll tell a quick story in response to what was brought up earlier by someone else, and then also ask a question if that's all right.
Please.
Okay, so in response to being feeling like you're bound or that you're trapped, it reminds me of the story of the donkey and the clothes washer.
Mm-hmm.
In India, there's this clothes washer who collects all the clothes from the people in the village and takes the donkey down to the river to wash them. The donkey carries the clothes on its back. But one day when he goes to the river, he forgets the rope to tie the donkey to the tree. And he thinks, oh no, I'm going to lose my donkey. I can't wash the clothes while the donkey's not tied to the tree. Well, somebody comes up to him and tells him, don't worry, all you have to do is pretend to tie the donkey to the tree. And he'll stay there. And so he does it, and he washes the clothes, and he finds the donkey doesn't move. And then he says, up, time to go, donkey. And the donkey doesn't move. And he goes, oh no, I have another problem. It still thinks it's bound. And so it tells him, just pretend to untie it. You go through the motions, and the donkey will follow you. And sure enough, he unties it, and the donkey goes away with him. So the idea is you are in effect the donkey. Through billions of years of evolution, your sense perception has developed only and has actually tricked you to think that you're bound.
Yes.
And it's a constant game that it plays with you. Like you said, it's only 5%. And
yes.
A donkey and a human. Well, yeah, it just made me think of that. About
that's one of the beautiful stories.
Yeah, it's a common story you've probably heard.
Oh yeah. Well, Sri Ramakrishna tells it.
And so, and then my question, it's a bit topical and maybe a bit serious also, or sensitive, I mean. But when you're talking about love and infinite love and being able to expose or have love for everybody, it makes me think of the recent tragedy in Uvalde, and thoughts and prayers to the victims of that horrible tragedy. But how do we find love for somebody like even the perpetrator of a crime like that?
Well, Sri Ramakrishna, of his own vision, said, I have seen that you are all Rama. All of you. The saint, the ordinary man, the murderer, the villain, this is all Rama. There are various forms and conditions of ignorance. Rama, as the villain, thinks that he must steal. Rama, as the murderer, thinks that to be happy, he must kill. Sri Krishna, in the chapter in the Gita called The Field and the Knower, the field and the knower, describes all of this. And then he goes on, I think it's the very next chapter, to talk about the higher nature and the lower nature that exists in human beings, and what becomes of each. And this is why, as Dr. Mudge pointed out, if you think that this business of the heart is simple, then you haven't really encountered what it means to be a bhakta. Because Swami Vivekananda says, in love all beings without thinking. Now, earlier in the poem, he addresses some of the things that you just talked about. I encourage you to read the whole thing. It'll be published. Hiranyagarbha's very beautiful interpretation of it will be published along with the talk. When Yogeshananda said consciousness is primary and is not plural, all of this is contained within that. All of this darkness and light. Another book I'm going to recommend to everyone who's listening is Barbara Brown Taylor's Learning to Walk in the Dark. Learning to Walk in the Dark. We have copies in the bookshop. This is she won all kinds of awards for the best sermons. This was a very accomplished Episcopal priest. And she left the church because it was a limitation. And she wrote something called An Altar in the World. First, she wrote a book called Leaving Church. Then she wrote a book called An Altar in the World. And then she wrote a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark. And she said, we misunderstand darkness. We think only the light is auspicious. And it is not so. And again, she speaks from personal experience. Yes, dear.
Just to address your question, is it Roberta?
Yeah, Roberta, yeah.
Roberta. Because that question often comes up when we're talking about these things. And being more of a bhakta than anything else myself, that sort of thing is something that I have intentionally practiced with. Like if there are people out there in the world doing things that I think are just horrible, the ideal of a mother's love is unconditional. And if the first thing we do when we hear a bunch of children have been slaughtered is we think of them as our children, those children, that could have been my child. But if you slow down and look at the person who did this as, what if that was my child? It really flips it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does.
It is a practical way to practice bhakti and apply it to those situations. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying it is a way to trick your mind a little bit. Mine needs tricking.
Well, because it'll just think us into a corner. It'll think us into confusion and despair. And then tell us, now, see, I told you, I'm the only one who knows how to solve this. And then it'll come up with a bunch of platitudes.
I'll make a comment.
Please.
I think this relates to what we're talking about. Shortly after Trump got elected president, Ram Dass put a picture of Trump on his altar.
Mhm.
And I thought that was cool.
I'd like to comment a second.
Yes, please.
I first came to understand this difference between mind and I guess the bhakti or bhakta love in the sense from Dr. David Hawkins, in the sense that the mind used symbol processing, logic, reason, intellect, and so forth, where love is a higher vibration. And because of the purity of his intention, doesn't need to use any of the symbol processing. It knows as a result of its purity of intention. And so when you go to, at least for me, when I'm understanding to love without thinking, takes it all the way to the point of being loving unconditionally.
Yes.
So no matter what, and that vibration then allows the person to act without thinking.
Very well said, John. Very well said.
Brother, there's a story. I'm not sure if I really know the significance of the story or if this story is meaningful or not. But let's say God created the Brahman created gods and the titans, and the gods were weak, so he decided to keep gods close to him or her, and the titans were strong, so he decided to send them far away to do his work. I don't know if it's just like a construction of a mind or if there is any reality to this.
Well, I hear your story, but I don't understand its significance, Rajiv.
I mean, the one way to think about it is like Brahmans keeps gods in the higher mental planes, or those areas where they don't have to deal with the ugliness of the physical world, and so it's almost like you keep them there, and then there are titans who are stronger, and the Brahman wants to send them right in the nitty-gritties of the physical existence, and they're almost, it's sure that they're going to get lost and they're going to get deluded and submerged, but it is his work that these titans are doing. And
Well, Rajiv, I just don't know this story or its context, so I can't really comment on it. There are many, many levels to this dream. Many, 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 infinite, I think we could say, levels to this dream. Because the dreamer is infinite, and we are therefore share in that infinitude, but not in our mental capacity. So these kinds of stories, sometimes they seem to relate to a particular context, and I don't know the context, so I really can't say anything about it.
Okay.
I don't know who the titans are. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Gaurav here.
Yes. Hang on just a minute.
Yep.
Hang on just a minute. Uma, was there something?
Yeah. I'm thinking, although we differentiate between bhakti, jnana, karma, and all that, but person who has arrived has been using all of these in an assimilative way. It's not one hard knock distinction, because until I understand what it is all about through jnana, get the real depth of understanding, I cannot bring my heart to be into that surrender.
That's an interesting
So,
perspective.
it's necessary. I'm not saying that you have to go to school or study scriptures, but I'm talking about understanding. Dhyan is understanding the way it is, the way things interconnect in life. Grief, joy, wonder, all different things are intertwined. And when you get the understanding of this kind of play, then you become to realize the truth. And that realizing the truth is part of bhakti.
Mm. Well, that's an interesting perspective, Uma. This definition of jnana doesn't really fit with Adi Shankaracharya's definition of jnana. This necessity of understanding and integrating all these understandings of human life. He says, Adi Shankaracharya and Vasishta says, don't bother to try to understand it. Don't bother to try to understand it.
I'm talking about wisdom.
Now wisdom is a different thing. Wisdom is a different thing. So, as I say, it's an interesting perspective that to try to integrate all these things and then the heart can awaken. It's not possible to pass any judgment or to say anything really about any individual's way of being with this. So the fact that you say this is, I honor with great respect that this is how it works for you. Wonderful.
The example of Vivekananda is the greatest jnani and yogi and bhakta.
Well, yes.
So it's possible to.
Yes, but we can't compare ourselves to Vivekananda or Ramakrishna or Holy Mother or such beings. We really cannot. If Sri Ramakrishna is representing it accurately, Vivekananda is an ever-free soul. He was never bound. From the dawn of creation, he was never bound. Never experienced the limitations of human life. And yet in this life, he seemed to. So it's always difficult for us to understand these beings. So, but this is what we're talking about today, is this bhakta's way of not trying to understand, but simply to embrace and to love, to embrace all being and therefore all beings. And yes, this is not a thornless path because of things like Roberto brought up. And you know, how do we deal with this? I loved what Cindy said in response. Very insightful. And we do think and think and think. There's no ways around it. But
Totally agree. My point is not to compartmentalize.
Yes, but I can't talk about all four yogas all at once. So we talk about them one by one, and do our best to integrate them and none of this is the truth, capital T. As Don Juan said, Carlos, stop poking at me. This is just a way of talking about it.
Too many words.
And so that, we do our best to talk about it because that's the job here. Talk. But, we do our best to make some sense of each of the yogas. And yes, dear.
I recently found out that almost all chickens are bhaktas. Almost all chickens are bhaktas. It's a very bad joke.
It's a chicken joke. All right. Anything else from anyone?
Yes, brother.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
Yes. So Gaurav here, sir.
Yes, Gaurav.
Yeah. So Swami Vivekananda it's one of his quotes that I refer to a lot when I'm feeling low. It's highly motivational. It says, you need to love yourself first in order to love God.
Yes.
Is that part of bhakti too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. How can you separate yourself from being? And our membership education gives us a lot of things that embed themselves in us, that tell us that there's something wrong with us, that we're not enough, that we're not adequate, all of these things. That all has to be taken to the edge of the ship, to the railing, and thrown overboard. That is not accurate.
And like kind of tagging along whatever Roberto mentioned, I think that kid didn't know that.
Well, clearly he did not.
And that is very sad on that side.
Well,
also.
The fact is that these people who do these kinds of things are in terrible pain.
Yes.
And they share their pain.
Yeah.
As Goethe said, a man sees in the world what he carries in his heart. And so if you're carrying a world of pain in your heart, that is what you'll see. And that is how you'll act. And that's why this bhakta path is not a simple path. The path of bhakti is a path of purification, like all of the other paths, because behind all of the appearance is purity. And as Hafiz says, every thought is an innocent step on the path. Yes, Gaurav.
Can we say in a nutshell, like be selfless to realize the true self?
Boy, howdy, that's a mouthful. That's actually coming at it from a karmi point of view. Selflessness.
Even in love, being selfless.
Oh well, that is the unconditional love. Selfless love is unconditional love, love for the sake of love itself, the highest form of love.
Almost feels that.
Well, I have another recommendation for all of you who are fans of Bob Dylan. If you haven't heard his most recent album, which was released in June of 2020, it's called Rough and Rowdy Ways. and it has a number of songs on it that reveal the purity of the wisdom that has arisen in Bob Dylan. So Rough and Rowdy Ways for those of you who like that kind of music. Anything else from anyone?
Shankara, I'd like to share a mental screenshot of joy that
You're breaking
had
up,
earlier
Amadas.
this
You're
week
breaking up. Whatever happened,
as
you're breaking up.
I was swimming laps at the Y with
We lost.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, now we can hear you. Start
I'll
again,
pass.
please. Okay.
So as I was swimming laps at the Y and I use earplugs when I swim, I heard this roar of laughter and giggling and splashing and unbridled joy. And there were about 53 to 4-year-olds in the shallow pool. And it was unbridled joy in a way that's really hard for me to describe, because they were all engaged in whatever imaginary game they were in, meter on 10. And there was just splashing and laughter and just pure unbridled joy, who were, because their job is safety, they were so serious. There was not a smile on anybody's face because they're looking out to make sure nobody gets hurt. And as I'm looking at them, I'm like, I clearly have spent most of my life living the lifeguard too serious. And now I want to audition for the team that's doing the unbridled joy, because I think that's, not that I know, but it seems to me like that's what God would prefer, is watching us play. It doesn't matter whether we play dodgeball or baseball or softball or football. As long as we play with respect and unbridled joy, just play. So I'm going to sign up for unbridled joy and play.
Put me in the lifeguard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, as is said of children, they are not contained or confined or made to act by the gunas. They are free of the gunas up until age 5, it's said. And so these children that you were seeing, they could express that joy because there was nothing in the way of it. That's the way it's understood anyway. So sign right up.
Brother, another aspect is that the bhakti path, or the even like the karma path, it's a non-conflicting path. Like it doesn't produce a lot of conflict in life. Like if the entire world, each and every person, hypothetically were to become like a bhakta, it would not stop the world from functioning. Like
No,
or a karma.
this is exactly what Christ told us. and then it came down to us more recently through the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. He said, just become a bhakta, do this, let your heart open and the whole world will be transformed. It won't stop. How could it stop if we become more loving and more sharing?
But if, on the other hand, if every person on this earth were to think that, oh no, this is all mythology and all that matters is the Nirguna Brahman, I shall retire. That is a very ideal state for a very few, but it can cause a lot of disruption.
Well, yes, of course, and it's not going to happen. It's a straw man argument. It simply is not going to happen. There's a story of Sita and Rama. Sita began to see the samsara all over the faces of the people of Ayodhya, and she said, Rama, you could do away with all this. You could make this all just blissful. Everyone could live blissfully and carefree. He said, you sure you want me to do that? Yes, please do that. Now, this is the Divine Mother being loving toward all her children. And so Rama did what she asked. Well, pretty soon, people's roofs were caving in. The water wasn't pure. This and that and the other thing were working. And so Sita came and said, I guess I was wrong. They have to have both the darkness and the light. They have to have the suffering and the sorrow in order to make them do what's necessary to have the society function. And so Rama restored it to the way it was. Everybody's roof was fixed and the water was pure, and so on and so forth. These are all the endless stories that we have. And this is why it's such a forest. It's such a forest of information. And so each of us, it seems, it is most auspicious if we decide for ourselves, this is how and who I am. And not try to encompass everything, but simply, as was brought up before, love yourself for who you are and what you are. This is why when Uma said her way of wisdom, who could be anything but reverent? Yes, Uma, go forward. Each of us is going to, but we must have that great self-respect. We must have that great self-respect. This is truly who I am and what I want. And not be afraid of admitting who you are, and most importantly, not be afraid to make mistakes. Oh, I thought that's what I wanted, but it turns out it isn't after all. Anything else from anyone? All right. Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be peace in the herbs, plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let this infinite, universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Let this infinite, universal peace prevail throughout my being.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So with that, we'll say sayonara until the next time we meet, which could be as early as tomorrow, for our reading and discussion group of the Love Poems from God book. We're reading St. Francis of Assisi. And then on Tuesday, we have the class on Holy Mother's life, studying Swami Chaitananda's book, Sri Sharada Devi, Her Divine Play. Then on Wednesday, we've taken up Swami Ranganathananda's book, Divine Grace. We're just a little bit into that book. And then on Saturday, but there will be no class next Saturday, but normally on Saturdays, we have a class on How to Know God, the book by Swami Prabhavananda, that is his translation of and interpretation of commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. No class next Saturday. I'll be out of town. And then, of course, the following Sunday, there'll be a talk. So,
Bye,
with
Jamie.
that, bye-bye.
Love you guys.
Thank you, brother.
Now,
Thank
I
you.
saw Lori zoom out of